Hi everybody, I'm Jackie Gardner, the NGSS TOSA for the San Jacinto Unified School District, and I'm going to show you how to use the Next Generation Science Standards website. So if you haven't already visited, you should go to www.nextgenscience.org. Now this is different from the California Department of Education where they display the adopted standards. California did adopt all of the standards. Not all states did. So for California, you can just go to the standards on this website and we have fully adopted all of them. Now, if we go to our standards button and we look at read the standards, this is where we have our option to search for a multitude of standards, either by DCI, which is our disciplinary core ideas. You can download them all if you prefer. You can look at them by topic. But what we're going to do today is we're just going to look at the tools that they have, so that way you can search for just the one you need for your grade, for your lesson. So if we scroll down and we look here for keyword search, say you're looking for something that has to do with cells, you know you're going to teach them, but you don't know what standard. You could type that into the keyword search here and type cells and hit enter, and we get a multitude of standards for many different grade levels that have to do with cells. Right now we're seeing a lot of middle school and high school because in elementary school they don't go that specific and they may not use the word cells. Now, say you are in elementary school and you would like to look up something, you have a specific one by your grade level. Let's go ahead and look here by grade level. Let's say we're looking for a first grade standard. If we're looking for our science and engineering practices, we can see if there's one that has to do with planning and carrying out investigations. And I can go ahead and hit submit. If I have other specifications, I can look at the DCI or the disciplinary core idea. I can look strictly at the discipline if it falls under physical or life sciences, or I could go by cross-cutting concept. Say I have students who are looking at different patterns. They're looking at the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the tides, and seeing if those patterns connect. Those are two different science groupings or topics, but they both have patterns when you think about how to understand the content. So they both will be under this cross-cutting concept of patterns and so forth. You have cause and effect, scale, proportion, and quantity, and so on. So let's just go ahead and continue with first grade, planning and carrying out an investigation. So I hit submit. Now I'm going to get my first grade standards that all have planning and carrying out an investigation. We have 3 of them here: waves and their applications and technologies for information transfer. Again, the same one, just we have one PS4-1 and one PS4-3, 2 different standards, same topic. How about this one? Earth's place in the universe. Everybody loves space. So for this standard, I clicked on it, and now I'm going to get the entire standard. The entire standard does include all these different portions, which include your performance expectation, which is your statement that just gives you a general idea of what the students should be mastering. You have your science and engineering practices, which again are what students are doing. They're what they're putting their hands on, they're what activity they're doing, what they're doing within groups to discuss with each other, it's their actions. We have our disciplinary core ideas, which are more like the traditional standards. These are the important facts or content that the students will need to know. So again, we have science and engineering practices are what the students do. Disciplinary core ideas are what the students know. And now your cross-cutting concepts are how the students think. So before, when we were talking about the patterns of the tides as well as the patterns of the phases of the moon, you're thinking about patterns, you're identifying them. That's what the brain is doing. So this cross-cutting concept is something that should not be ignored. It is definitely something that gives you an idea of how the students are processing that information. Now, on the site here, there are a few different pop-up options. If you go over here to viewing options to your right, you'll be able to see there are different ones here like hide pop-up, black and white. So if the color coding is too much for you, you can switch it to black and white. Practices and core ideas. If I click on this, see how it changed the colors here. So again, in our performance expectation, it's going to give you your SEP and your DCI. So it's already telling us here in blue that we're going to plan and carry out investigations. We are going to have the students do this work. I hover over our orange now, and we get our DCI, or what the students will know. I'm going to go ahead and click on practices and cross-cutting concepts. Now we look at it and the colors change. So again, we still have our practice here. The students will be making observations, and they're going to be making observations about the amount of daylight throughout the year. They're looking for that pattern. What is the daylight in fall? What is the daylight in summer? They change. We just had our fall equinox. We can already see that the days seem to appear to be much shorter than they were over the summer when we were playing in our backyards. If you continue down now to the related evidence statements, if you do not know what the evidence statements are, this is the tool that's going to help you understand what you're going to be expecting from your students. So when I click on that, it gives me a document that looks similar to your standards, and it does have the top information. We have our SEPs, our DCIs, and our cross-cutting concepts. But when we scroll down, we see there's a new section called Observable Features of the Student Performance by the End of the Grade. This here is where you can find literal examples of what you can expect the students to be doing. So if I go up and I read my performance expectation again, so we want to make sure that the students are able to make observations at different times of year to relate the amount of daylight to the time of year. So what does that look like? In the classroom, we can look for them just identifying the phenomena. So identifying the phenomenon under investigation, students identify and describe the phenomenon. So they should be able to see it and tell about it themselves. And the purpose of the investigation, which includes the following idea: the relationship between the amount of daylight and the time of year. So they should be able to explain that to you. Identifying evidence to address the purpose of the investigation. So they should be able to pick out what is the evidence that we need to know in order to carry out this investigation. Planning the investigation, they should be able to, in first grade, talk about a brief plan of how they can go and observe the daylight during the time of day. Perhaps it's something where they can gather evidence online. Perhaps it's something where they're out observing, but they should be able to come up with that plan themselves. And then lastly, collecting the data. So if they are doing this activity, they should be collecting the data along the way. They should be taking notes. They should be making observations. And from those observations, they should be able to explain to you why it's important. So if I have a first grader who is outside observing how light or dark it is, or perhaps where the shadows are, they should be able to explain that data to you based on whatever they planned out. So you could have different small groups meeting together to do different projects. If you have the same standard, you could have some students who are researching online. You could have some students who are doing outside observations. If they decide to do it, let them go through the full process of inquiry. If you see that they are choosing something that might not work, you also might consider letting them do it just so they can problem solve and see when they come across something, how do they have to change their investigation to continue finding that evidence that they need to support their claims. Now, if I close this and go back to our original page, you'll see that there are a few other things on here with your standard. There are connections to other DCIs in first grade, in which case this doesn't have one, it's by itself. To other DCIs across the grade levels, we can see here in fifth grade, they come across the similar DCI or disciplinary core ideas. So they're talking about these seasonal patterns or patterns on Earth again in fifth grade. You can also look at the Common Core state standards if you want to make a connection between your language arts and your math. So I think that kind of wraps up reading the standards on the NGSS website. Again, the website is www.nextgenscience.org, and I hope that helped.